think for itself, but in fact, it can only accomplish what the math and logic is telling it to do. Now, where did these technologies come from? Over time, there's been lots of innovation across things like chatbots, where we've begun to see the immersion of these technologies into the mainstream, but there's a lot of complexity that we don't even see on the front end as a user. How many people have used chatbots in the room? Or what's your experience been? Pretty impersonal, right? It almost has to be, though, right? Because people, if it pretended to be a person or a human, you probably wouldn't trust it, or you wouldn't feel good about it. And that's actually one of the golden rules or tenets of building chatbots is you're very clear and transparent that it's a machine. So people don't feel like they're talking to a person. And in addition to it being impersonal, it doesn't do a very good job, right? In most cases, you ask it to do a thing, and it's not able to interpret it correctly, or it gets some part of the natural language processing incorrect. So it's got a long way to go, and some of the mainstream tools are just simply goal-oriented. They're just focused on solving a quick problem, answering a quick question. But there are kinds of technologies that are leveraging quantum computing, and that's the one I want to focus a little bit more on today, because that's what's activating the next generation of personalization. And it's this idea of developing what we call neural networks. And there's a reason why we call it neural networks, because it's based on our brains. It's based on the way we think as humans. And this deep learning recurrent neural network is a kind of neural node that we're developing that enables us to use time as a component. It's probably been a while since any of us has been in biology class, but this is a human brain cell. And the reason why I'm showing, don't worry about any of the specifics. There'll be a quiz later, but if you want to take a picture. But the reason why I share it is because this recurrent neural network is based on a neuron. And the part I want you to focus on is this sort of sequential chain-like nature, right? It does look a little bit like Italy, but what's happening here is there's a notion of time. There's a temporal component to the way that our brains and our brain cells work. And that's exactly what scientists, since the 1980s, have been working on unpacking, is how can we teach these tools to actually understand the passage of time, and how can we then do what is the most basic function of any of these neural networks, how do we then create a feedback loop, right? Because everything we do when it comes to decision making is based on learning something, trying something, learning from the response of that, and then moving into a next step, moving into a next sequence. And this is exactly what that algorithm looks like, this most basic functional tool for building these new models. We've got an input layer where data is expressed. We have an output layer where it's targeted to. And again, from a digital perspective, this could be anything inside of an experience. But the recurrent piece is, as they're going through this process, being exposed to new data, we're applying algorithm components and math components that are testing it and providing feedback. So that constant loop back into it, and the use of what are referred to as hidden layers or states, which is all about the context, is creating memory. So these devices are actually remembering what's happening and pushing it forward. So that's the whole concept of it getting smarter over time. So now you know it was based on real human brain cells, right? And this concept is something that's embedded in the way that we as human beings think. And in a minute, I'll talk about why there are flaws in that. And there are lots of use cases for recurrent neural networks, right? And it has to do, for the most part, with unstructured data, because most of our world is unstructured data, right? When we think of all the different things that don't fit into a box squarely, and that's things like music or sound synthesis, speech, the way people talk to an Alexa device or the way they interact with a chatbot, it's not always readily understood. Image recognition, machine translation, chatbots, and natural language processing, even stock predictions, being able to apply the way that we automate the process of buying stocks is based on this notion of time and looking at how something behaves, changes, and how we create a feedback loop around that. One of the coolest areas, and this is something that we've integrated into our platform, of this recurrent neural network working and creating results around unstructured content is with pictures. And the internet it's probably got billions of pictures on it, right? And all of it's unstructured, right? The way it comes in is unstructured. There's no way for the computer to understand what this is a picture of. So we have to teach it how to scan the photo, and then we have to use these variables to be able to test against other photos so we can make informed decisions and predictions. And what Amazon's recognition platform is doing, and the way we've integrated it, is we're using this technology to create a set of weighted variables. So it's comparing one photo to a set of other photos, and statistically, if this is a person on a mountain bike, there's probably a pretty good chance that he or she is on a mountain and that there's probably mountains in the background. So it's weighting all of these things as part of that recurrent learning process. Okay, who wants to tell us about their Match.com experience? I think it's awesome that there's actually a book called Love in the Time of Algorithms. And I have no dog in this race because I've been married for decades now. But this is a fascinating book because it goes into a lot of the problems and challenges around choice, right? And we talked about unstructured data, and the most unstructured data is the human heart, right? Our chemistry. And what Dan Slater talks about in this book, I think is one of the most fascinating areas, is how we sort of have created, this is a monster of our own creation, we have an expectation of greater choice now. The internet has been responsible for that. Because we have such great access to lots of different ideas, lots of different thinking, we expect more as we go along. And that's been a huge challenge for us to unpack. Like, how does that actually work? How do we make it easier for people on a platform like Match.com to find somebody that fits our profile, that has a greater likelihood of being the match for us? And their CEO, Sam Yagan, talks about how every business, and by the way, he's a Harvard math whiz, so if that gives you any kind of foundation to build credibility on. He talks about how every business needs to have an algorithm. Not just Match.com, but every business has audiences, every business has data, and every business should have an algorithm. And for them, even though they're clear that they're not quite to a point where they can perfectly predict who you should marry, they claim a metric of about 500 marriages a day. So that's I'd say that's pretty solid validation if you buy it. So we've talked about algorithms, we've talked about what the basic concept is. We've talked about how that's creating these higher order systems. And I've mentioned a couple of times that there are consequences. And the consequences are typically because they're inheriting the flaws of their creators, which kind of sounds like my son, right? This is the problem, is that we think that we have all the answers when we create a system, we create automation, but then we don't actually know what's going to happen until we put it out into the world and create the systems and the conditions to test against it. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Tay. Does anyone know this story? You're familiar with Tay? Yeah, so there's a book called The Human's Guide to Machine Intelligence by Kartik Hosinger. And he talks about this use case about Microsoft being so bullish and so excited about creating this chatbot that they put it out on Twitter. And Tay was meant to be a synthesis of all these Gen Z teenagers, right? Sort of a profile of each baked into this chatbot. And they put it out in the world, push it out of the nest and say, go, grow, become something new, become something exciting, teach us. And within just a couple of hours, it became Godzilla. It was, between the racial slurs and epitaphs and profanity, they had to shut it down in less than 24 hours. Now, you might think this is a failure, but many people broadly in the AI and machine learning industries saw this as the tipping point. This is the feedback we needed. This is the recurrent feedback we needed, that we can't rush to pushing things out till we've properly thought through all the different use cases, which means we have to test and test and test, right? And that's top of mind for all of us right now because we're looking at all of the downside and the steep ethical questions that come around automation, right? So one of them being autonomous vehicles, right? I mean, there have been real accidents and tragic things that have happened as a result of testing this. But at the same time, what are all the positive benefits? How many miles did it drive successfully? It doesn't change that outcome, but we still need to study and carefully test these concepts and test these ideas before we push them out into the world. The other big part for us as digital people working in the digital world is how these machines are handling our private data. Right? So if we hand over things like PCI compliance or GDPR compliance to the realm of AI to ensure those things, are they going to be able to adequately protect us from any kind of liability? Lots of steep questions to cover. But I think the big game-changing idea is that we're making all of this easier. It's happening faster. And in the same way that our platform is lassoing these and we're modeling our own algorithms to drive innovation, we're making it easier for digital marketers and digital professionals to make this stuff on their own. Algorithms are going to be the new language of marketing. Marketers are going to have a lot of tools at their disposal, but as Sam Yagan said, every business needs its own algorithm, which means you need to understand your audience in a way that you can tune these things, test these things, and apply them to your business or mission challenges. So what we've been doing recently, in fact, I'm going to Palo Alto next week to work with Amazon on our progress with this, but we're launching a capability that is going to allow you to add recommendation engines like Netflix, like Amazon.com, to your own digital experiences. Now, this is a technology that would have taken 10 years, millions of dollars for us to build. And by the time we were done, we would have missed the market. But by tapping into AWS as a partner, and they're pulling back the veil on their own technologies to get access to these core algorithms. In fact, they have a marketplace of algorithms as a starting point. And then they're producing tools like their Deep Racer, which is a sort of a very basic toy that enables users in the digital marketing field, people who've maybe done very limited coding, to learn how to understand how to train machine learning models. So once we unpack that language and make it easier, we'll be able to launch these technologies rapidly into the marketplace. And again, marketers will be the ones who are calling the shots on how to add these new and innovative technologies. Really exciting stuff. The last use case I'm going to share is, this looks a little bit like the Terminator. How many people have iRobot? How do you like it? Needs help? Yeah, doesn't quite do a good job? You're probably OCD, so that's right. Okay. So, I have one too. I think one of the coolest things that Roomba does is when you get it home, you download the app, and the first thing you do is you give it a name. Right? You don't worry about anything else. You give it a name. What did you name yours, if you don't mind me asking? Did someone up here say they had a? What did you name yours? Rosie. Rosie. That's awesome. Love it. Yeah. I call mine Sweepy. And I think, and this is partly an AWS story and a cloud activation story, but it's also how AI and machine learning are changing the mission because of the feedback loop, right? So that whole core idea of how we're self-learning, and as businesses, we're also learning from the feedback we get from these systems. And I actually had an opportunity to see Colin Angle, the CEO of iRobot, talk at reInvent about how their mission changed when they started making these machines smart. So the first couple generations didn't have AI ML capabilities. You just sort of set it on the floor, it had sensors, it swept, it did a not so good job, right? But the last couple of years, they've seen a surge in feedback from customers, satisfied customers, in the way the robot is sensing the floor space and the way that it's able to do a much better job. And Colin Angle said, I don't even care about the cleaning anymore. I don't want to be a consumer robot company that makes cleaning devices. The real trick is to make your home aware. We want to be the gateway for mapping your house so that Roomba can actually find opportunities to integrate different kinds of automation, not just the cleaning capabilities, but your lighting systems, your thermostats. They want to be the gateway to doing all of that. They want to connect it all in the cloud, and the way they're getting smarter is by not just mapping your home, but my home, everyone else's, and looking for patterns. And the way they can get meaningful data from that is by using AI. The other thing he talked about was this really elegant concept of convenience maturity. Right? When apps first came out years ago that could control your lights, so we plugged something into a light switch and you could open up your phone app and turn it on and off. It was pretty cool. Now you have the neighbors over for a beer and you're like, check it out, I can turn my light off, on and off using my phone. Well, these didn't catch on, and the reason why they didn't catch on is because it wasn't really convenient. Right? It's pretty easy to go over and turn the switch on and off, right? So the human convenience component was already settled. But when these technologies started integrating lots of lighting in your house, and scheduling the way that you could set your lighting on and off, and they started integrating security systems, thermostat control, all of that stuff, well, now it reached a level where the convenience maturity changed the game. And that's what we're looking for, is ways that we can use these technologies to actually open up that mission. And that's what he talked about. He talked about how this whole ecosystem is built around the idea that we can get to making your house more aware. And what kinds of opportunities are those going to open up for us? Smart homes, smart automation, really exciting stuff. And none of it would be possible without that quantum computing layer, the cloud, and having AI and machine learning governing the way that we're getting that data back and being able to process it, make it meaningful. The last thing, and everyone's been super patient, I appreciate it. Last thing I'm going to talk about is this idea of hope. I feel like we could always use a little more hope in the world. And I think in Florida, we're ground zero for climate change. And we see it all around us. And we see the impact of famines around the world. We see the impact of industrialization. We know that these are challenges that not just us, but the next generation is going to have to deal with. So how can these technologies, how can AI and machine learning have an impact on all of this stuff? It seems disconnected. What's cool is I'm involved with a business unit at AWS called Impact Computing. And the mission of Impact Computing is really simple: to make the world a better place. And so they started with that kernel idea, that basic idea of having an impact. And they started thinking about how can we use AI to process data, big sets of data, to allow us to more predictively look for problems and allow governments and industry to step in and intervene. One of the most exciting use cases that they actually have a proof of concept this year that's launching is for something called FAM, or the Famine Action Mechanism. And I actually saw a panel talk about this at their AWS Public Sector show in Washington, D.C. And what they've done is they brought together leading organizations around the world, like the UN and the World Bank, and they've been able to lasso all of these huge data sets around satellite imagery, conflict data, local food prices, agriculture. They're taking all of that data and they've created a pipeline into AWS. And then using the same tools that I'm using today to train models, the same tools that you and other digital marketers will be able to use to build these smart machines, they're using those resources to create custom modeled AI and ML that is allowing them to identify patterns, identify hotspots, and allow governments and organizations to step in and intervene earlier in the process. Now, this can also have an impact on things like human trafficking. I don't know if anybody saw Chance Glasgow talk about that earlier today, but this is a huge problem. It's a problem here in Florida. So to kind of bring it full circle, when we think about the impact of weather change, we think about the impact and the frequency of hurricanes, we think about ocean level rises. I'm going to stop talking about negative stuff now. But when we think about that horizon and that edge, technology is one of the solutions. And we need humans to help guide that. We need people to make it more meaningful. Does anybody remember this? I actually have a magic 8-ball if you want to come up and check it out later. I love it because, I may be on a phone call with somebody and I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere. Is this phone call going to end soon? Outlook not so clear. Not with anyone in this room, though, by the way. I would never do that. But, the magic 8-ball is built on this whole principle of unpredictability. And where do I go for answers? And we all have to be data-driven digital businesses. And that doesn't mean that you have to be Netflix or Uber. You have to go and build a mobile application tomorrow. But it does mean that you have to value the investment in data and business intelligence and all those resources that make the data more meaningful. Getting down to that and allowing machines to help us do the job, to find the patterns and find the things that are really meaningful, is where AI and machine learning can make a huge difference. Hopefully you felt good about this presentation. If the reply is hazy, I don't want to know about it. But the last thing I'll say is that, as I said in the beginning, I think Orlando is where the next big thing is going to happen. And our company is really invested in being here. We're hiring here. We do all of our principal innovation here. Yeah, we spend a lot of time in Seattle. We spend a lot of time with Amazon, but we bring it all back home. And the way that we continue to bring great resources and great talent to Orlando and keep them here is by doing this stuff. We have to have an investment in these kinds of experiences. You agree? Yes. That's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, I appreciate your time today.